Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Baroness Sue Gray.
Carried my mic down.
And we're well lit today with the nice green of St. Patrick's, so you're feeling at home already, I'm sure.
I'm loving it here.
Excellent.
Absolutely. I've been more often than you've been.
You have. You're coming for the coffee and conversation.
I come here for coffee and conversation with my very good friend. I can
Baroness
see.
Sue.
Hello, Ita.
Oh.
I know.
Yeah, we're not forgetting Baroness Ritchie.
I come here for coffee and tea and sandwiches with Margaret Ritchie, my colleague in the House of Lords, who is here and who's been a great friend to me and supporter. And my sister-in-law is here as well. Hello, Ita.
Wonderful.
In fact, I got a message before I came here. I got a message this evening from my husband, Ita's brother, Bill. And he said if I could say something nice about him this evening, that would be really nice.
Yeah, we'll keep you on track with that. And perhaps he could join us the next time. He might be able to do a song for us. So like all good stories, we'd love to start at the very beginning. And we know you have your proud roots in Tottenham, where your parents brought you and your brother up. Can we hear about some of the experiences of those early days for you?
Yeah, of course. So I am hugely proud of my Tottenham roots. I was born in Tottenham, lived most of my life in Tottenham, and I'm a big Spurs supporter. But I've taken the title of Tottenham as well in the House of Lords. And I think, like so many people, you know, my mum and dad, my dad was from Fermanagh, a small village in Fermanagh called Belcoo, on the border with Black Lion. And my mum was from a village in Waterford, Kilmeaden. And they left Ireland, as so many people did, to go to England to find work. Mm-hmm. And they met in London. They didn't know each other before then. They met in London, got married, and we lived in, you know, my mum's family. My mum was one of 7, and her siblings, they were all very close. Their mother had died very young and left 7 children behind. Mm-hmm. And so their father left them in Waterford. And when he got money, he would bring them over to London, and they would come over sort of 2 at a time. And it was really tough, I think, on them. And so when she came to Tottenham, all her brothers and sisters were there, and we literally lived with each other. We lived sort of like on top of each other in adjoining flats. We ate, you know, we all ate together. I've got 17 cousins that's my mum's side of the family, and we would argue a lot amongst ourselves. But when we went out, if anybody argued with us, you know, we were obviously very close then. And
yeah. So in many ways, it was idyllic because you had those strong family roots and connections, and you kept each other going and good crack and good company. But it was hard work. Your dad really, would have worked 2 jobs.
Yeah, my dad had 2 jobs, and he worked all the hours of the day to provide for us. My mum worked many jobs. She worked in a sweet shop, in a pub. You know, they worked to sort of provide for us. And it was really difficult times, I think, to be Irish in those days. You know, you will all be familiar with the signs that would have been up outside the pubs.
Did your parents feel that? Did that permeate to yourself?
You know, that was, you know, we all felt that. But at the same time, they embraced Britain, they embraced the jobs and the work that it provided for them. And every summer, like so many people, we would come back here. Yeah. And we would always go to my dad's place in Belcoo, a farm, and we would run wild. Yeah. Because in London, you're kept very contained. You know, we weren't really, you know, you couldn't go out, and we had no back garden. And we would come here and you wouldn't see us from like dawn to dusk.
Liberation.
Absolutely. And we hated the idea of having to go back, and we would cry when we would have to go back. And then we'd look forward to the following summer. And I think my mum and dad, you know, they were very proud when they would come back. Yes. They were very proud of all of us, but also just, you know, what they were doing with the new life they were building. Yeah. And so very special times. But they, you know, at the heart of it all, they instilled in us hard work, you know, tell the truth, you know, support each other. And I think those values came through, you know, have stuck with all of us.
Yeah, instilled that code of morality, but also that work ethic that you've demonstrated throughout your life as well. And I suppose that's typified by the fact that you had an early start in the civil service. Yeah. What age were you when you started?
So I started work at 17. My dad, and I was very close to my dad. Mm-hmm. My mum had mental health issues, you know, throughout my childhood and my life. And that, I think, was a reflection of what she had to go through, you know, in her own life, earlier life. And so I was very, very close to my dad. And then, you know, one Saturday evening, he just had a massive heart attack and died. And there was no choice but to, you know, stop school, go to work. I applied for a job in the civil service, which was the most junior job going. They don't have them now, but it was the most junior job, and I was shocked when I got it. I mean, that was how I think I felt.
So was it a jobs and benefits office, that kind of thing, at the coalface?
And my job was the worst job in the world. It was, you know, at that time, it wasn't digital. It was like all written case papers, and staff would not be able to find the case notes. And my job was to wander around the office and try and find them. They couldn't find them, so I wasn't probably going to be able to find them. But the thing that I also remember was that, you know, this was just such a shock to me to lose my dad. And I can remember there were two women in the office who were older. I thought they were very old at the time. I don't think that now. But they sort of put a bit of an arm around me.
They were kind.
And, you know, and I can remember their names, Helen and Nora. And they put an arm around me and supported me and, you know, just, gave me, I suppose, a bit of stability during the day.
Yeah, because your world, had, as you had known it, had fallen in.
Absolutely, and I had a younger brother who was 14, and so I also felt the need to sort of look after him, look out for him. And then my mum, who, you know, obviously found it very hard to cope, looking out for her as well.
Of course. And did you begin to get a sense of pride in the fact that even though you were very young, that you were going out to work every day, you were travelling with other people with a common purpose, earning your own money,
I was getting on
supporting
the tube,
the family.
And you know, I was going out at night as well, and making new friends. And so so it was good. You know, I did feel that responsibility, but I enjoyed it.
Yeah,
I have no regrets about having to leave school early and you know, not go on to college or university.
There's sort of a presumption now that all people in education should go on to third level in university, but it wasn't necessarily the case then. And obviously then it took you through the civil service and up to the higher ranks that you rose to. Just speaking about your connections here, obviously it's been much rehearsed, your links to County Down. What about meeting Bill? Did you meet him in London?
I met Bill in London.
Yeah.
So my husband Bill is from Portaferry, and I met Bill in London, and I think, you know, I mean, over a fairly lengthy period of time, we got to know each other.
You have to say something nice now, don't you?
I've got to say something nice. Last time I talked about him, so you know, this was all Bill's idea. Bill would play, you know, he was playing in the bands here, and he had this idea that he'd buy a pub, and we bought the pub. And after about 6 or 8 weeks, Bill found life working on the other side of the bar not as good as actually drinking on the other side. So he found it all, you know, not really his thing. So he would go back to London to work and then come back to the pub every now and again, whereas I just stayed on. I took a career break from the civil service and stayed on, ran the pub, where I learnt so much.
And did the community in the Newry area, did they welcome you?
Fantastic. You know, I didn't know any of them. I was a stranger, but they were absolutely amazing. And every night when I would lock up, the pub was in the country. Yeah. And every night when I'd lock up, there was a different person that would lock up with me. They had like a little rota going. Nice. And they were really great. I mean, the other thing I'd say about the pub was that, you know, people would come into the pub quite late in the evening and then expect to stay very late. So the people that were offering to help me lock up. I think there was a bit of a motive as well behind it all.
Yeah, a few extra drinks.
Yeah, exactly. But no, they really were the most, I think, amazing community, and they supported me throughout. And I did that for 3 years.
And so the role of landlady, it was sort of unexpected because Bill had sort of driven it, but you enjoyed it.
I loved it.
And
really loved it. It's
totally
really
different.
hard work, and I'm sure many people here have worked in a bar. It is really hard work, and I think you have to be, available to talk to people all the time.
Yeah.
They expect you to do that, and why wouldn't they? Because they're coming in, for a couple of hours, but you've been there all day. I would drag beer kegs around the place, crates of beer. I could never do it now, and I wouldn't, I just think it was such hard work, but it was really, really good.
And it gave you that insight and empathy for businesses and how hard it is to run a business and be successful.
And that just in time, I think with a small business, you're doing that just in time where you can't have a load of beer sitting around because it'll go off.
Yeah.
So you have to be able to order enough to keep you going. But the worst thing would be if you ran out of beer, obviously.
No pub worth its reputation could do that, right?
We didn't do food. I don't think I could ever do food. We didn't do food, but I would do the occasional run most weekends on a Saturday or whatever there was a place in Newry called Friar Tuck's.
Yeah.
Many of you
Still
might know it.
there. Yeah.
And I'd go in with my order, and the car would stink with burgers and chips for the whole week. And then just as it was about to clear, I'd be back the following week.
Yeah.
But
it was a good
great.
tactic to maybe sober up some of your patrons.
That's exactly it.
Yeah.
But no, it was great. And it was a great period of my life. And I think I got to really love this place.
Yeah.
And
then you were entering a new phase, which was bringing up your two sons.
Two sons,
in London. Did you then return to the civil service after they were at an appropriate age?
So when we left the pub, I had a call. I was on a career break, and I had to make a decision. Do I leave the civil service and stay on in the pub, or do I go back into the civil service? I had that decision to take. So I decided to return to the civil service. The first thing I did was actually, I've had a job in Belfast. They got me a job in Belfast in the Marine Harbour office, which was great. But then after about a year, I think we decided we'd sell the pub and go back to London.
Yeah.
And I went back to the civil service then.
And what was it like being a woman in the civil service at that time, late 80s, sort of early 90s? Did you think about it? Were you aware of it?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things. I think it was hard I think it was quite hard being a woman. And I mean, I didn't, I just got on with things. I think I didn't, let it get to me, but I just got on with things. But I think the thing that I found the hardest was, there was an expectation in those days that everybody would have been, if you were going to progress in the civil service, that you must have a degree. And I found that very difficult. And I can remember a conversation where, some guys were talking about the colleges they'd been at. I didn't realise they meant Oxford or Cambridge. I thought they meant like Tottenham Tech. And I can remember that moment. That
realization.
That moment when you just wish the ground would swallow you up. But then later on, I think in my career, I'm actually very proud now of having got that background. But at the time, I just didn't want anybody to ask me anything. I just wanted to keep my head down and get on with things.
And that mentality obviously served you well, because you did rise up the ranks and you assumed a number of really important and pivotal positions in different government departments. What did you think of Whitehall then, as it was sort of going through the 90s? Was it a positive period for the civil service and how they conducted themselves?
Yeah, I mean, I think I absolutely am so proud of having been a civil servant, and I'm very proud of all the civil servants that I've worked with. And I think they do a fantastic job, and I find a lot of the negativity that gets spoken about them, it's just people not understanding the job they're doing.
Yeah.
I think, the values that the civil service has, I think have stayed throughout, and I think they are there today. I think it's a great career. I mean, it's been brilliant to me. There have been times when, you know, it has been difficult. I have felt, you know, that if I had had a different background, would I have progressed more quickly? But at the same time, I think you just get on with whatever is thrown at you and
let your work speak for itself.
Yeah, and just do it.
And so your skill set was sort of required again when you should take up a role back in Northern Ireland as Permanent Secretary for the Department of Finance. And
so
you can tell that, right?
I loved my time in the Department of Finance and I loved my time in the civil service here. When so I applied for the job in the Department of Finance and I was actually shocked when I got it. I hadn't discussed that I was going to apply for the job with Bill because I thought he would put me off.
Yeah.
I thought he would say to me, "You must be mad." So I applied, and then when I got the job, of course, you know, if you apply for a job, I think, and you go through the interview and then you get it, I think you have to take it.
Yeah.
So I took the job, and when I arrived here, everybody once again was so friendly and so supportive. But, you know, it was just a massive change. And so I spent my first couple of months thinking, you know, how am I going to do this job? And I decided I was going to get out and meet a lot of people, get to understand what the issues were that, you know, were most concerning people. There were no ministers at the time in government. For the first 18 months of my time here, there were no ministers, so the civil service was getting on with it. And I would say, I think, you know, people, I think, this is not about me at all, but the colleagues that I worked with have had most of the time without ministers, and they do the most fantastic job. They keep the place running. So I went out and, you know, met loads of people, you know, got reviews underway, rates review, and I am a ratepayer. Got the rates ready to be reviewed, so that when ministers would come back, we had something to put to them. I met charities, you know, community groups, just businesses, and really heard from them about what their concerns were. And so that was how I really decided to conduct the job.
And a real sense of achievement because you were doing that and you were interacting on the ground.
Yeah.
So I take it that was during one of the spells where Stormont wasn't up and running.
That was my first
and as you
18
say,
months.
Civil servants acted up in a way that they wouldn't be able to in Whitehall, so they were quite adept and experienced in that respect.
I really enjoyed it.
Yeah. And then I think towards the end of that tenure in the Department of Finance, it would have been coming into the beginning of COVID, which was a period which fundamentally changed our society. How did you feel? Were you able to do your job? Did you feel frustrated that you couldn't do elements of it, or how did you work around it?
So, I mean, I think none of us were prepared for COVID, and the Assembly and Executive had just returned. There was only I think they were only back in place for about a month or 6 weeks, and all of a sudden we were faced with COVID. And I can remember, you know, in Whitehall and Westminster, they were deciding, you know, what they were going to do for business support and everything. And this is where I think devolved governments can really do well. You know, they know businesses here, they know what support is needed. And so, you know, we were obviously going to be given some money, but I think it was really good that we looked at what the UK government was doing, but we didn't necessarily always follow it. And I think the first thing we decided to do, you know, me, the finance minister, the first thing we decided to do was to give businesses, all businesses, a 3 months rates holiday, while we thought about the sectors and how we could support people the best. And then, you know, they were really difficult times. And then as the restrictions came in and less people could, you know, come into work, I mean, I think also the other thing which was amazing was that, you know, we were a civil service which had sort of like probably about 90% of our workforce in the office. And we went overnight to having only about 10% in the office. You know, people just adapted so quickly. Many of you will remember, you know, people were working, they were doing homeschooling. You know, it was just absolutely really pressured times, but amazing times. In the Department of Finance, we were responsible for procurement, and I can remember there was a temporary mortuary built across the road from the building I was in. And I can remember walking around that mortuary with the guys in, in the department who had been designing it and procuring it, and feeling just this, they were so proud of what they were doing. They treated that design of that mortuary as though it was going to hold their family members, which I thought was just absolutely amazing. But at the same time, it was so stark that, it would have held, I think it would have held about 3,000 bodies, and they thought of that. And I can remember driving home that night and actually thinking that, this is just going to be so awful. I mean, in the end, we didn't have, thankfully the mortuary wasn't needed. But obviously so many people, did die. And it was a very, very difficult period. And, people were having to get used to doing Zoom meetings while, we were getting to meet babies and their children and animals on the screen. But no, really, really difficult times.
Yeah, and as you look back on it, it seems even harder when you look back at just how profound it was, moments like that.
Absolutely. But the way that I think everybody pulled together and worked together, I think, and supported each other was amazing.
And do you think that yourself and the department did a good job of trying to get funding to organisations to keep them afloat during that really difficult time?
I gave evidence to the COVID inquiry, some months ago, and in my statement, I did say I felt so proud of the department, so proud of everybody. In the Department of Finance, our role would not normally have been to provide business support to hospices, support to the airports. That was not our role. But overnight, the teams were, coming up with proposals for how to support and compensate businesses who just had to close overnight. We provided a scheme for the hospices and the Cancer Fund for Children because they'd lost all their fundraising overnight. And that is the only way, that is their only source of funding mainly. So really fantastic work. And I think, and I know that many businesses, would say they survived because of that support.
That's right. It was a lifeline for them. And then, as well being documented, you then subsequently were charged with leading an investigation into Partygate or events that happened on government premises during that very difficult COVID period. So just to put it in context, so you were then back in London again in Whitehall. And you were tasked with this as a senior civil servant. That must have been so difficult that your boss, the Prime Minister, is asking you to investigate something so difficult.
So really difficult time. And I think one of my learnings from that time is I don't think any civil servant should be asked to do an investigation like that, because you are investigating, senior ministers and, civil service colleagues, and it is very, very difficult. And so I think, looking back at it, I knew that I had to, I would have wanted to be honest and frank in what I was going to write or what I found, but at the same time, really difficult to be asked to do something like that. So for me, I think for the future, if anything like that ever came up, I think it should go to somebody external.
And what was your guiding principle? Because you were aware of that difficulty, but what sort of grounded you to say, I need to do this justice and diligently and respectfully, but I need to uncover the truth?
So I felt, and I experienced this when I was working here, I think people gave up so much in those times. I came across people who couldn't go to the funeral of a loved one, couldn't go to hospital to visit people. People just gave up so much, and I felt that, I had to, I suppose, do what they would expect me to do. And in fact, there was a young woman in the Department of Finance who I worked with, and one weekend, while I was still here, she had been on Twitter asking the head of BT about, he was talking about people in hospital and care homes were going to be given tablets, iPads, so that they could communicate with their family. And she asked him she was asking him on social media, when they would be coming to Northern Ireland, and he said about 8 weeks, and she said that would be too late because her father would not be here. And I got in touch with her and, you know, supported her. And whenever I got appointed to do the, you know, do the inquiry into parties and gatherings, she messaged me on that day. And I think, you know, I kept her in my mind because I thought, you know, she's expecting me to, you know, to give justice to this. And so she stayed in my mind, and I would occasionally message her and, you know, keep in touch with her. But I think people gave up so much, and I think that was what would need to be reflected.
Yeah, and that grounded you and kept you focused on that. And then obviously it would have been hugely unwanted in knowing the person that you are, the scrutiny that you were put under during that period, being thrust into the public eye. How did you cope with that?
I think it was really difficult. I wasn't expecting it. So the night that I got appointed to do the inquiry, you know, a colleague of mine who owes me a very big drink, a colleague of mine who essentially, you know, phoned me and talked me through why I needed to do this inquiry. You know, whenever it was all agreed at the end, like 5 minutes later, I walked out of the building, and 5 minutes later, all the media had the news and they were all over it. And I think you're right. I mean, I have, you know, as a civil servant, I never want to be in the public eye. I want, you know, I'm very happy, much happier being behind the scenes. You know, I'm here this evening because Caroline asked me. This is not something I would normally do. And, you know, I would find myself walking down the road, going into shops, outside my house. There would be, you know, photographers and journalists, and and it's just not me. I found that very difficult.
Yeah, and it's something that
I just tried to keep my head down and, you know, hope that nobody would notice me or put glasses on. And
but the thing about the modern sort of media age as well is it's not something that can be put back. The genie can't be put back into the bottle on it. So day to day, even as you continue in your role in the Lords and other roles as well, do you find it hard if people take a second glance? Obviously, you like to say hello to people, but you know, it must feel strange.
I still find it difficult, and I think sometimes I'm on the tube, you know, going into London, and I can feel somebody sort of like sitting opposite me, sort of staring at me. And I've also had, I mean, some of the funniest conversations I've had actually have also been on the tube when somebody has said to me, you know, are you Sue Gray? And you sort of think, you know, do I say yes or do I say no?
Just say you're an impersonator.
Yeah, exactly.
Sue Gray impersonator.
I could always use my married name, but I haven't done that.
Yeah.
So I think I do find it difficult. I still find it difficult today. And, you know,
It's just something you manage.
Yeah. I take a deep breath.
Yeah. And as if that wasn't enough, then you did actually make the transition from a distinguished career in the civil service into the political sphere. As obviously a central figurehead in Labour, as Chief of Staff to the then Leader of the Opposition, Keir Starmer. How was that in terms of preparing potentially to be in government after years of Conservative-led government?
So whenever I was approached about the role, I thought of it, and perhaps I was naive, but I thought of it as, you know, and I still do think actually, as big part of public service to be, you know, I thought of it as being a public servant, preparing a party for government to ensure transition into government is, I think, a very big thing. And that is how I thought of it. And I really wasn't prepared for the backlash, I think, that, you know, obviously followed.
Yeah.
And so that was just not something that I had prepared for. And so that's how I saw it. I didn't see it as necessarily, you know, a hugely political position.
It was an extension of what you've done around public service.
Yeah, and I think, you know, in the same way, I think any investigation like the one I did should never be done by a civil servant. I think there is something about, and you know, in future, when, you know, there is to be a general election and there is a party in opposition that, you know, is expected to go into government, I actually think it would be enormously helpful for the for a senior civil servant to go and work with that party to help prepare them.
Aid the smooth transition.
Yeah.
But it had been done before in terms of people transitioning from the civil service to these kind of political with the small p roles, advisory roles, chief of staff roles.
Yeah.
It had been done before, so not that you're one to feel sorry for yourself, but did you feel like this is piling in on me again because it's me, or is it a woman thing, or how did you rationalise it?
I think it was a mix. I think the people that I know that previously had been civil servants, a couple of guys that I've worked with, who became chiefs of staff. I think they didn't have the profile that I had, and and that profile wasn't anything that I courted, but it was there. I think also, it is the fact that I think women in public life, women in business, senior women, I think wherever get a tough time, and so it's a mix. It was a mix of things.
Yeah.
And then I think the civil service, also found it difficult what happened.
Yeah.
So I think it was a combination of things that built up. Very difficult, 6 months. I had to wait 6 months then before I could take up the job.
Yeah.
And so I did spend some time here.
Good.
In this lovely place. And my neighbours are fantastic to me. And so.
And what was the transition like that you then did enjoy and you succeeded in terms of being chief of staff for the leader of the opposition and securing the move to Downing Street as well? You must have had some satisfaction with that.
Yeah, I think, joining Labour in the September, the election obviously taking place the following July. I think, looking back on that as well, in that period, of course, the focus has to be on, winning the election.
Yes.
But great. I learned a lot, as well as obviously preparing them for government. But becoming, getting into government and being a chief of staff in government is very different.
Yeah.
The breadth of the responsibilities, the tasks that you have. It is very different. But I learned a lot, as well as I hope contributed a lot.
And you were working with civil service colleagues.
Many of my colleagues that I'd worked with,
who then
18 months earlier.
Yeah, and that is what you would say at present about the UK political system as well, that there seems to be smooth transition between different governments, and the civil service are instrumental in delivering that.
Absolutely. And
so that's
in the run-up to the election, we would have that period where the opposition can speak to the civil service in departments to prepare them so that, the civil service can hear what they would do if they get into power.
So you left Downing Street to take up a position in the House of Lords. And we know you're now Baroness Sue Gray of Tottenham, although how does that feel, hearing that?
I have to say I find the whole I do find it difficult to, and I think perhaps it is, it's hard to imagine sometimes that this, I still think of myself as this girl from Tottenham who, when I was growing up and I was in primary school, I didn't realise until I went to secondary school how poor we were, because we were all poor, and I didn't realise until I went to secondary school. And I suppose when I got to the House of Lords, all these thoughts come back. I thought about my mum and my dad. I thought about them and how they would feel. They'd feel very proud. I haven't talked much about my mum. I do feel that in everything I do, I should always talk about my mum. So my mum had mental health issues, and whenever I did my maiden speech in the House of Lords, for most of the time I was writing that speech, I didn't mention my mum because I didn't feel I could. I knew that I'd get very upset. She had mental health issues. She did take her own life, and it's a really difficult thing to deal with. But she's a big part of who I am today, and how I go about things, how I hope that I support people in work, and in whatever they do. And also, when I look back on my mom, there wasn't much support for people with mental health issues then. It was really, I would hear people say to her, pull yourself together. You know, just not the support that I think there is today. But I hope that, you know, I talk about it. I would talk about it in the workplace.
Yeah.
But it's a big part of me. And
you wanted to honour,
I
but
did.
you were probably also a little bit afraid of your emotions
I
because
knew
it's a
that I was going
significant
to, and I
day.
did get emotional, and
Yeah.
I knew I would get emotional, but I did feel that I had to mention her
Yeah.
because I'm
And-
very, very proud of her as well.
Exactly, and it's a tribute to your mum and dad. You're there,
Yeah.
this working class
Yeah.
girl from Tottenham.
Yeah.
The fact that you weren't aware of your class.
Yeah.
You know, there must have been some sense of the, you know, here are the limits and go for it and work hard.
Yeah,
So
I took, I thought about the title I would take. I did think about, Strangford. I did think about, you know, parts of Tottenham that I'd lived in. But I felt that if I took, you know, various roads or various areas, nobody would know what I was talking about. And I am hugely proud of Tottenham. And I'm hugely proud of here as well, but I'm really proud of Tottenham. And so that's a title I took.
how did you manage all the robes and the
Oh,
pomp?
they are really impossible. You have to, I mean, Margaret, you will know this. They tell you to, you have to keep your arm inside the robe because you're actually basically holding it on.
Yeah.
It isn't comfortable. But I think, you know, across the chamber, what is lovely is that whatever party people are in or wherever they sit in the chamber, I think they're very supportive of each other. And, you know, the Lords, you know, Margaret, all credit to Margaret, and others do a really fantastic job in scrutinising legislation that comes to the House of Lords from the Commons,
Yeah.
sometimes in not a very good way. And they make it better, and then it returns. But
Yeah.
it is still, the title.
It all feels probably very new
It
as
feels,
well.
and it
It's
feels,
just this
it
year.
just feels it's, you know, this girl from Tottenham. How could she possibly be a baroness?
So is there still a world where someone like yourself who's achieved so much still has imposter syndrome?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. I feel that every day. And, you know, even coming in here this evening when somebody welcomed me back, please call me Sue. It's hard.
Yeah, to adjust.
Yeah.
Yeah, certainly. Well, one of the major focal points of your maiden speech as well was talking about the civil service
Yeah.
and the early experiences that we've heard about tonight. But you also sort of launched a defence of them because, you know, at times you've sort of suggested they do get labelled
I think-
unfairly.
Yeah. So I think all governments, in a way, you know, what I was saying in my maiden speech was, you know, all governments do this. I think it sometimes feels easy to blame perhaps people who can't stand up and speak for themselves. But, you know, I hate the term when people call them pen pushers and the blob, and, you know, other sort of like not very nice
Derogatory.
terms. Yeah. Whereas I think, you know, the people I've worked with have been amazing. And when I was when I was working in a benefits office, you know, I would say unsung heroes actually.
Yeah.
And, you know, not paid huge amounts, and actually are there because they want to do a good job and they want to contribute to society.
A lot of the arguments made about this part of the world is that there's a sort of disparity between the public and private sector, that we're not maybe entrepreneurial enough. That may well be a legacy of the Troubles, etc. But are we too public sector focused here in Northern Ireland, do you think, from your experience?
So I think, first of all, I think some great public services here. I think there are some areas where I think, you know, you could open it up to the private sector a bit more and perhaps, you know, allow then the civil service to focus on its on the areas it needs to focus on, where you shouldn't contract it out. You should keep it in the public service. So I do think there is room to
be braver here.
Yeah, to be braver.
And then
that's a really good way of describing it.
Diplomatic. And then in respect of Whitehall, I think you'd probably accept there's some level of reform that's needed structurally in the civil service as well.
Yeah. So I think, you know, first of all, I think what working here, you know, showed me was the importance of devolution, the importance of not everything being developed designed and delivered in Whitehall, because, you know, when you work in Whitehall, you really have no understanding or experience outside of that area. And when I came here, I could really see the benefits of devolution. But it really annoyed me when my colleagues in London, who were my colleagues because, you know, I was going to go back, they would ring me up on a particular day and, you know, tell me what was going to happen, rather than actually involving you in the development of that policy. So I do think, you know, I would like to see more responsibilities leave London and Whitehall and go to the regions of England, and responsibilities to Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. So I would like that. I do think that, you know, as well, there is an issue with pay. And I know that, you know, many people won't agree, but I do think if you want the very best, you have to pay. Yeah. And I think that all too often it's seen as though, you know, it's very difficult to give the pay that people deserve. And I think you just focus on delivery. You have to have, you know, a few tasks rather than a whole load of tasks, and you need to have stability so that things are they don't keep changing.
Well, we don't always have stability here in terms of government, but we do have some at the minute. We're holding on to. Yeah. How did you think the 5-party coalition worked here? Was it reasonable, or was it hard to work around?
My goodness. So I was in Whitehall in the Cabinet Office when we had David Cameron and Nick Clegg, 2 parties in government, and I used to think that was difficult some days. That seemed like a dream. I mean, you know, I honestly thought 5 parties, I think, is a really difficult number of parties to have in government. You know, all credit to the parties for wanting to do it. But I think that, you know, that to be a bit more agile in decision making, you know, get things done. 5 parties is a very difficult number.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in your maiden speech, so you were very diplomatic and conciliatory around, you know, cross-party relationships. You know, you commended various colleagues from across the House. Notably former Prime Minister Theresa May, and the kind of work that she did over the years. Do you still believe in the concept of bipartisanship and working together, or does recent events, does it make you more cynical? Or
So I think one of the great things about the House of Lords is that you know, all parties have, I think, tried to work together and, you know, to deliver together. And I am a huge supporter of that. And I do find it hard when, you know, if the parties aren't working together, because I don't think, you know, people on the ground, I think they don't want to see their political parties or their governments fighting with each other and disagreeing with each other. They want to see them delivering for them. Yeah. And I don't think, you know, so I think for devolution, you know, in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, where you may have a different party in power than the party in Westminster, I think they want to see those 2 governments working together to deliver for them, not be arguing and, you know, taking lumps out of each other. Yeah. So I'm very much a big supporter. And when I did my maiden speech, I looked across the House and there was Theresa May, you know, you've got, you know, people that I've worked for, they've been the Prime Minister, I've worked for them. Yeah. Theresa May, David Cameron, you know, they are all there, and I've got the hugest respect for them. And, you know, I think they're really tough jobs. I think being in politics is a very tough job. Yeah. And I love the way that whenever it was mentioned that Mike Nesbitt is coming here in a few months' time, I think it will be a sellout as well. Yeah. As people, you know, but I've got a lot of time. I mean, I've got a lot of time for Mike. I think, you know, he's, you know, difficult job. But yeah, so I'm very, very pro the parties working together. Yeah.
Do you think the dynamic, though, is a little bit more toxic now, or is it sort of, is that rose-tinted glasses and things were better then, or do you feel that sense, not just UK politics, but world politics feels very really, fractious right now?
Feels very fractious, very fragile, and, you know, people, taking lumps out of each other, and I think that is a really difficult thing.
It's not conducive.
It's not, and I think it's hard to think that it will encourage people into politics or public life. And we need people to go into politics and public life. We need young people to go in, and I think a lot of this just can switch them off.
Yeah. And so this year has been busy. So as we've discussed, you've become Baroness Sue Gray, although just call her Sue.
Please.
But actually, you've been busy on other fronts as well, because you've also been appointed head of Kinsella UK, an international advisory firm. How are you finding that? Wearing that hat, are you enjoying that as well?
So I'm loving that. The guy that is the founder and chair and CEO is from Dublin, Declan Kelly, lives in New York, but he has got a thriving business in New York and has established a UK business. He's also got an Ireland business, Dublin and Belfast, and so I'm really enjoying that. I'm learning loads of new things, but what is really I'm absolutely when I first got approached, I wasn't sure I would be able to, to do it necessarily. But actually, the skills that I think you pick up in the civil service, when if you're leading a department with many thousand staff and budgets and political complexities, those are quite transferable. You can bring those skills, but I think wherever you are, you can bring the skills across. I'm enjoying that. I'm chairing a small organisation supporting Afghan women and girls on the ground. I'm loving all of them. And I'm fitting in the House of Lords, so I go to see Margaret, sit with Margaret some days. And
you're recently appointed Pro-Chancellor of Queen's University Belfast, just another string to your bow.
Which is also fantastic. And that was also another moment where, having not been to university, to be appointed as a Pro-Chancellor, I thought, it's just great. And I love Queen's. And everybody loves Queen's as well. So when I'm over in London and even in the House of Lords, people come up to me and say, I see you've been appointed to Queen's. It's got such a fantastic reputation. What it's doing around, research, around AI, it is just fantastic. And
so will that role allow you to work in with students and researchers?
Absolutely.
And how will that?
And the students are so important to it all. And I love the fact that there's a students' representative on the Senate. And I think that is fantastic that you get to hear their views. I think we want to promote the work of Queen's, promote the research field. Take what the university is doing. It's set up, a campus in India, and I think it's going to go from strength to strength, and I'm very excited to be part of it.
Yeah, and you're managing all these roles somehow.
I know. I have actually decided that actually my week is a very busy week. Whenever I left government, you sort of think, what am I going to do? And you worry that, for a little while, will I have enough things to do? And I think now I've probably got, I've got quite a lot to do, but I love it.
Yeah, and in respect of the kind of first experience you've told us about Irish people living in Britain and everything else, how do you think that's evolved over the years? Positively?
Yeah, positively.
Yeah.
So I do think that, and all credit to the Irish community. So for example, when I was growing up, every Sunday morning my dad would take us to Camden Town. There was an Irish music shop. My brother and I we were not that impressed, but we would go to this shop every Sunday morning, and then we'd go to the Irish Centre in Camden. And actually recently I went back to Camden Irish Centre. And the work they are doing there today is amazing. They've always done amazing work, being a place for the Irish community. But today, it's a much wider service that they are providing. So great things going on. And, I think I feel very proud that my mum and dad were from here.
Yeah.
And I think, I look
Proud of it. And when you go to, if you're working in America or you've cause to be there as well, you know, do you think it's a myth that we cling on to, that we're sort of special, or do you think? I think. Are we special?
I think, and I'm going to say we.
You're honorary.
I think we are special, and wherever you go, I mean, I am in so many meetings, and it can be in New York, it can wherever it is, and you know, somebody with an Irish accent or an Irish name, and then their first question will always be like, where are you from? And then this conversation starts, and they always know, people always know somebody.
They know.
And I'm sort of thinking, you know, I can't believe that, but they have this conversation as though, you know, and my dad would have done it as well. He'd hear that somebody was from somewhere he knew, and he'd actually say, do you know X?
Yeah.
And, you know, funnily enough, they often do.
Yeah. It's that desperation that it has to be right, doesn't it?
I think the Irish community, wherever it is very proud of its roots here. And I think, you know, always wants to talk about it. It feels a very special place. And now that I'm working, you know, with Consello, you know, a lot of the US, you know, people come here. They want to invest here. They want to, you know, they want to give something. I think they never forget
that we have something to offer. Hopefully,
and I think it's fantastic.
Yeah. And finally, Sue, if I can ask this question, who has been your? I think I know probably this. There could be a few people, I'm sure, but who's sort of been that pivotal person, mentor in your life?
There are a few people, I think, and I think it's very hard to name one. So I think, you know, I know I have got a very strong work ethic, and I think I get that from my parents. You know, they worked hard, we worked hard. We weren't allowed to be sick. You know, I can remember going, you know, if ever I said like I was a bit too ill to go to work, my mum would say it was a privilege to go to work. So, you know, there was no staying at home. And when I think I mentioned the two women that when I joined the civil service, a little bit lost, I think, at 17, not expecting to have to go to work at that, you know, in those circumstances. And, you know, going home every night, still thinking that my dad would walk back in the door. They were there for me, these two amazing women. And then as I went through the civil service, you know, and found myself at the, you know, the most senior levels in the civil service, there were two cabinet secretaries that really were, I think, brilliant in how they brought me to the table. One of them is a colleague of ours in the House of Lords, Lord Gus O'Donnell, who, an amazing person, and the other cabinet secretary who sadly died far too early, Jeremy Hayward. And, you know, the fact they brought me to the table, I was very different to them. I hadn't had the, you know, the university education or anything like they'd had. I hadn't been, you know, out in Washington or wherever it was they had been posted to. But round the table, what they knew was they needed to have diversity of thought. They knew they needed somebody who thought a little bit differently. And they both invited me round that table, and I learnt so much from them and from my colleagues who were around that table. But, you know, they were amazing people. But all along the way, I think I have just worked with, you know, worked with great people. Caroline and I were talking earlier. Recently, I took part in a debate in the House of Lords. The government's got a proposal for its fast stream, which is the fast stream of the civil service, which is, you know, normally for graduate intake. And they got a proposal to restrict that to working class students. And I went to the House of Lords to intervene in that debate. And I spoke to say that I, as somebody who was a former civil servant and from the most working class of backgrounds, I didn't agree with it. You know, when I joined the civil service, I learnt so much from being with people who got my aspiration from meeting people that I could never have met in my home life or my school life. And that broadened my experience. But I have just worked with, you know, and met actually, you know, in my family and social life as well, I think just the most amazing people, and I feel really privileged to, you know, be here today, to be here with all of you, and to have had the experience that I've had. And even though I haven't liked being thrust into the public eye as much as I have been, you know, I've got used to it. I've got used to dealing with it, and you know, it's still a very privileged position to be in.
Well, Sue, thank you for those honest and fascinating insights into your life and the people who have shaped it. And I think the lesson there is that we thrive through diversity, and from the experiences that we can all take from each other. So thank you for coming here this evening. Thank you to Tim. And I hope you've all enjoyed this very candid conversation with our new friend, Sue Gray. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.